probably had a journey somewhere around 2015 or so. I was beginning to wonder what it was in the corporate world and in the nonprofit world and in the church leadership world. What is it that sets people apart as really organic, intuitive leaders when they may or may not have formal training? You know, that was kind of part of it. I was hearing out there in the coaching world and even in training worlds, you know, at a break time, sometimes somebody highly qualified would sit down, bend my ear during a break time and just talk about it. And what I kept hearing was the whole premise of the book is likability. The book is not about 4 quadrants of human behavior. The book is not about MBAs, technical degrees, PMPs, and certifications. It is about the willingness on the part of any personality type to try to find that place that relates well to all personality types, all situational characteristics, all cultures, and finds a place to walk your personality into a point that you are heard because you're likable. It has nothing to do with top-down authority, has nothing to do with even formal grants of authority. What it has to do with is your ability to create what I mentioned in the book. It's called the law of attraction. You're willing to try to find that happy place, whether it's at a family reunion, corporate environment, or in some sort of organizational expression, is to find the way that you present your behaviors in a way that people will listen and become likable. So what I want to do first, Bobby McGraw is with us, and I wanted you to maybe just talk a second, 2 or 3 minutes about an excerpt, something from the book that resonated with you, and let us all kind of weigh in here. So just on and off your mics and weigh into his comments, and I'll try to guide that discussion. So Bobby, you go first, okay?
Sounds great. Well, it's a great resource, so thanks for putting it together. One of the chapters that really stood out to me is honestly the last chapter about being a coach. Yeah, so you open with the story about what it was like for you to get thrown into being a coach for a kids team. But here's what it says. Coach has a lot of meaning. The coach can mean to teach or instruct another. It may mean to tutor, mentor, or even prepare someone for life, a specific task, or an assignment. Coaching in sports and other activities, even music, has been around from the beginning of time. Even in the Bible, we see a form of coaching that's called discipleship. Other historical writings will portray coaching as apprenticeship. Not everyone is born with the natural ability to coach others. Sometimes sole contributors with great talent and skill struggle to transfer their known skill to others via coaching. But to be a coach is an identity, a skill, and a lifestyle. And so I just found this chapter really helpful because a lot of times I feel like we see leadership that's more of a top-down approach, which certainly there's times for that. But as I read this chapter, it made me think that more often than not, treating leadership like coaching could be very valuable. So I appreciated that chapter particularly.
Yeah, and I'm going to stand. I had something went with my mic and my headphones here, but somebody else, what's your thinking about what Bobby's bringing forward? I think that these are at least kissing cousins. You know, when you're developing somebody through a coaching mentality, and I mentioned in that chapter, you can identify as a coach as a concept, as an identity, and really as a practice. But they're similar, discipleship. So anybody else want to weigh in on that? That idea that came from the book. Anybody? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I love the concept that the coaching model almost seems like it is a requirement to be able to lead well. Meaning, if we're leading well, we're indeed always coaching, and if we're coaching, we're leading well. It's a hand in glove experience.
Did anybody? I don't know if all of you gotten to that chapter. See the way I tried to separate. So there, from practical learning to be a coach to a lifestyle identity. So I'd love to hear somebody's comments on that. I played with that chapter a lot because I love being a coach. I love to identify as a coach. And I learned to be a credentialed coach, not just an intuitive coach or a life coach, so to speak. So anybody else there as a part of that chapter, could say another word or two? I appreciate what you're bringing forward, Bobby. Anybody? Just make sure you're unmuted. You know, one of the things, Bobby, I'd love to hear your opinion about some of the illustrations in that chapter. I don't know, I'm not put you on the spot. Was there an illustration in that chapter that kind of caught your eye a little bit about identifying as a coach? Anything there?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think in the early part of the chapter, you illustrated that you caught a lot more things from your parents than they necessarily taught. So certainly there were things that they told you to do or instructed you on, but there's a lot of things that I think you rattled off that you caught by observation. And so I thought that was key, just to think about not just what we say, but how we do it, how we live in leadership. But then also you gave a couple of the technical definitions from ICF and others where it talks about partnering and it talks about inspiring, helping people maximize their personal and professional potential, relationships. So just that idea of partnership, I think, is huge, because I think sometimes there's an us versus them mentality at times in leadership. But that idea of partnering with people, helping identify any gaps that they may have, helping them to fill that gap and take next steps to be everything they're created to be. So a lot of those kinds of things in that chapter stood out to me.
Yeah, and I like that you picked up on the ICF thing. I mean, you know, there's coaches everywhere. But to be a coach, I think it has we have to have a standardization. ICF brings an international standardization to it. So that's the kind of the clinical side of it, the learning side of it. But again, when I bring my parents in, my mother's still coaching me, 91 years old. So what I do as a leader, we not only can be a coach intuitively as a lifestyle, but we also watch for coaching moments for our own selves and our own self-development. And that is important for a leader, to turn that light on in your life, that you can throw the light on okay, this is a moment. Okay, what can I pull from this? And so you're being coachable, I think, is a high leadership trait in the world of leadership. So it's a partnership, it's a guide, it's a formal friend at times. It's a heavy strategic listener and all of that. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Bobby, before I move on?
I think one of the key competencies that came out in the chapter was just the power of asking good questions, and instead of having all the answers, trying to formulate questions to help drive thinking in the people that are on our team. So I don't know if you want to say anything about the power of questions, but that's super helpful.
Well, it is. And I actually pulled an excerpt from my last book, Sensible Leadership, where I have a whole chapter on it. And that's been something that's helped me as a coach, because I'm not a natural coach. I'm not a naturally benevolent person. I'm sort of a kind of a top down kind of a guy. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. To be a coach, I had to learn that concept of pause, what they call holding the silence in the world of coaching. They call it holding the silence in the world of therapy. They also call it holding the silence if you're a trial lawyer. And so when you start looking behind the curtain of the law industry or therapeutic industry, you'll find that questions keep you a step back from a telling environment. And yes, how questions are powerful. And being able to craft how questions begins to, what I would say, necessitate a coaching leadership type of lifestyle. Is a pause before you tell, pause and ask. So I appreciate you picking that up, and I pulled it from Sensible Leadership, but it is still science that's important in the world of likability. That you're not the guy or the gal that's always answering every question and stepping into every silence. But we learn as a lifestyle, as an identity, and as a credentialed practice as a leader, to be a coach brings pause. And you know this, Bobby, you create moments for solutions to happen when you ask a great question. And that is a likable trait that you don't come to every table, whether it's a sales meeting or it's some sort of other leadership strategic meeting, with every answer. You may be loaded with answers, but as you ask questions, you may be finding better answers. I appreciate you picking that up.
Absolutely.
You know, Rick, on in that regard, in that chapter, there were one thing that just struck me and you've kind of mentioned it, but the concept of skill set, style, and identity, lifestyle, and I've always really, until reading through Likability, thought of likability more in the sense of, okay, I'm like the number two guy that everybody loves, but likability really is it's a learned skill set, including just when to stop talking, or a style that allows your deliverance to not sound like you bark, or that you're Pollyanna. I'm just learning so much from the concept that likability is a skill and a style and a lifestyle that you've got to invest in to learn that technique. That was my big takeaway from that chapter.
Well, I appreciate that, Chuck. And we've talked about the 9 core competencies of leadership a lot in my coaching and training. So when you get down to the to be able to negotiate, I think that's number 8 in the 9 core competencies. Right before leading through change, negotiators learn to not only ask strategic questions, but do not play your hand early. But what it is, it's so influence and likability are attached to one another, right? That's why the title is like it is. So we can come with all the answers, taking the full grant of authority, bringing it vertically down, and we can certainly negotiate at that level. But when we come to the other side of the continuum and wait and ask, and so we are gaining influence. Likability is a byproduct of influence, in my opinion. We don't throw one out with the other. We can be unlikable and have influence, but when we have likability, we are gaining a different kind of influence. I'd love to hear somebody speak to that. Chuck, you were speaking to it. Anybody else have a comment there before we move on? And it's good to see Jerry Morla on, and I'll come to you in just a second, Jerry. So, Chuck, did you have another chapter you wanted to say a word about, or an excerpt or anything?
Excuse me. Yes. So my favorite chapter in the book is on alignment. Okay. And when you list kind of the 1 through 4, let me find where I highlighted this. Yeah. You say, how would I describe my why? And then the 5 values describe the energy that propels the motivation, and then personal preferences and tendencies. So I actually did that little exercise, and what I discovered here is that oftentimes I try to align by force, which never really sticks. I mean, and so when I read through this, I thought to myself that there's a quote here. Let's see. Yeah, Jack Canfield quote that's in there. It's not an accident that musicians become musicians and engineers become engineers. It's what they're born to do. If you can tune into your purpose and really align with it, setting goals so that your vision is an expression of that purpose, the life flows much more easily. I love that last phrase. When those things happen, life does flow that's much more easily. And trying to make that organizational in structures, deal with different personalities, boundaries, et cetera. That whole chapter is a big aha to me.
Well, I appreciate that. Of course, I love Canfield. I've read everything I think he's ever had. And I think I've heard you say this as a large organizational leader. I'm not identifying everybody, who they are, what they do, but as a large organizational leader, you know that we have to keep teams empowered. And Jerry will speak to this in the world of shared leadership in a second, is that keep asking why. When we know why, the how drops out of the trees, right? And process will drop out. So leading, alignment does not happen necessarily naturally. It has to be strategic alignment. And many times that is answering the question. And I think I may have heard you say this before, but some of the people that I love to watch lead and have coached raise that flag of purpose every morning. Why are we doing this? Why are we on the planet, even if it's a more of a heroic kind of a question? And I think it does drive likability, and asking why will drive towards alignment more easily than top-down, strategic, authoritarian type of leadership. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, one of the lines you say early in the chapter is, if people are not aligned with a vision, which is a picture for the future, and strategy, how to make that picture reality, you can try to motivate them all day and not get anywhere.
Right. So how would you apply that possibly to your work, or how would you take that and use it, Bobby?
I think all of us find ourselves in seasons where we're so in the weeds that we're just trying to get day to day or meeting to meeting. And if we stay there too long, then the organization begins to drift, or the people on the team don't have a clear, compelling something that's pulling them forward. And so we end up just trying to put out fires instead of actually getting important work done. And so just that reminder to keep coming back to vision and keep coming back to strategy and have both of those together.
Yeah, I like the way you say it. I've said it, we can work in our business or we can work on our business, and we have to do both. Most people like working in their business because it takes them away from the why or the global conceptual or existential version of what they're doing. But if we can find a balance there, that leverages what Chuck said. It leverages alignment, it leverages purpose, and I think it leverages profitability and productivity when we find a healthy balance between that, and natural alignment happens. Matt, won't you go next, and then we'll jump over to Jerry, and make sure you turn your mic on. I'd love to hear. We're not going to say anything else about LSU. Maybe I'll maybe say a couple more things. And I know Chuck's a Dogs fan, and I don't know who else might be, but we'll talk about that in the rankings, maybe offline.
Offline.
You go ahead, Matt.
Sure. So my book literally arrived at my door 30 minutes ago. Well, now it's been about an hour ago, but I've been listening again to the podcast, Rick. And so that was where I was getting those little 9-minute, 10-minute blurbs on the podcast have been extremely helpful and beneficial. And so I'm going to go to that. I did find one thing in the chapter on being a team leader, but from podcast number 10, you said the only valid test of a leader is his or her ability to bring people together to achieve sustainable results over time. And we're talking about alignment, and I don't think you can lead people if there's a lack of alignment. You have to be aligned and you have to have that purpose, or you can't produce sustained results over time. Meaning you can't be a leader if you can't bring alignment together. It sort of goes along with what these guys were just talking about. But there's one thing, and I just flipped it open. I'm going to be totally honest with you. This is like flipping the Bible open and hitting the scripture and going, oh, that's what I should do.
It's kind of the LSU way, right? I mean,
sometimes it is. It looks like it is in terms of choosing offensive line players. But under team leader, under chapter 9, you're quoting a lady named Molly Jigley. I believe I pronounced that correctly. But it says an effective leader will know her team members' strengths, weaknesses, and motivations. And I think in terms of likability, if you're going to lead people, you can lead them a lot better if you know them. And if you know their strengths and their weaknesses, you can create alignment a lot better if you know your people. But I really liked, going back to that podcast, that ability to produce sustained results. And I don't think you can do that if you haven't tried to be a likable person, if you haven't tried to approach it that way.
I appreciate that, Matt. I appreciate that. I am hammering you about LSU, and I think you also have an MBA from LSU. That makes this more fascinating, this whole conversation. But I do thank you. You're the only guy last week that talked about the podcast. The podcast has been built as supplemental training to give us an audio. I can keep it evergreen and keep it moving and keep it fresh. And I appreciate that. The quote, if you have the quote written down, what was important to me, that's not my quote. That's just me and my reading and my listening is about sustainable results. Alignment helps us push results on down the field a lot longer. And we're not having to go back and try to realign all the time. So sustainability is a high level of executive presence and executive acumen happens because we are knowing our teams, we are understanding our teams, we're trying to put the right people in the right places and all of that. And likability gives you a chance to have a voice. You have influence if you're at least likable enough that a person believes that you're trustworthy and that you're not exhibiting some sort of passive aggressive behavior, but you are walking with them, not just always bringing ideas and solutions to them. I appreciate that. Now, all of you can weigh in here. Now, Jerry, I don't know, I mean, you don't need to get off mute, but Jerry contributed to the team chapter. And when I first started coaching Jerry, he was working on his dissertation and some other research. He's a fiber optic expert, worked all over the world. And he had so much information that he contributed to that chapter that I slammed it over into the appendix. So if you get a chance, Jerry Morla is featured in the book. He's an expert, worldwide expert, in so many areas. So Jerry, unmute here, and I'd love to hear your comments and what your favorite chapter or excerpt was. And I'd just like to hear from you. You're really our resident expert, and you know I used your quote in the chapter on team leadership. But Jerry gave me a concept in our coaching about co-located virtual teams and all those dynamics, because one time I talked to Jerry, yeah, he was in Charlotte. Next time he was in Egypt. It's kind of like crazy. So why don't you just talk a moment about your excerpt or chapter of favorite? So you just go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I really like the excerpt. Power releaser brings about more engagement and productivity in people, especially when there is compelling purpose and the culture is healthy. Okay. And
yeah.
the reason why I really like that, it really goes in line with you know, the some of the leadership doctrines that I have espoused, and we have talked a lot about Dr. Purpose. And shared leadership is a concept that for some reason has not spread as fast as I would have hoped right here in this side of the world. However, we see it as a leadership doctrine that is very popular in Northern Europe and Nordic states, for example. And I believe that the existing body of literature shows that, because most of the authors come from that area, right? So in the concept of shared leadership, right, basically explains the phenomenon of how anyone in your team, regardless of assigned and appointed level of authority and empowerment, right, they have the ability to step up, right, and just come in and contribute and do their magic, you know, as needed to help the team move toward progress. So this excerpt, right, in my opinion, is so aligned with that, because there's something that people don't realize, and that is that everyone has a superpower to share with the world, right? And you will be surprised how many people in organizations, they do not know that. And even if they do know it, they do not feel comfortable with releasing it, because many leaders tend to have this hierarchical mindset and have not visibly or intentionally foster these behaviors, right? And verbally promoted you know, that increased trust among all team elements, so that everybody just feels free to do their thing, to share their superpower, step up when they need to, and help the team score wins.
What I would love, Jerry, and there's so much that you can contribute. I'm going to watch our time. So I know that when you have flown from Charlotte to Egypt, and you've worked in the fiber optics industry, and you're an unbelievable trainer, a researcher. So give us one example where you have seen this power releaser mentality, not only to create likability and influence for you, but where you've seen it push productivity out in some of these international circles that you've worked in. Do you have one succinct type of example you could share with us?
Okay, so one instance or one example where shared leadership could be displayed, right, is when you're working with teams that are distributed globally, right? You have people are spread over, I don't know, 8-10 different time zones, and it's just hard to everybody to come together and communicate in real time, right? So because of that, you have to set in the factors and conditions for not only the team as a whole, but at an individual level, for everybody to be able to step up, right? And take charge, step up, take charge, and lead as they need to in their time zone. You know, even if nobody else is available at that moment to sync up and to request permission off. You have to intentionally set those factors and conditions and empower every team member, right? So that when it's their time to be on, they know that they're in command, they know they're in control, and they know that the rest of the team is going to trust them, right, to continue moving the ball forward.
That's really good. So is there a certain sentence that you might use with an international leader that you're trying to release power into? So is there something that you would use influentially, or dispensing your likability to them where they trust you? So what would that might sound like, that conversation?
So I do not know. I do not know that is one sentence specifically, but more about continuously promoting and fostering the culture of one team, right? We work as one. We don't work as individuals. We stay as one. Maybe you all seen the movie Gladiator, right? When they were in the Coliseum, all these chariots going against them, and General Meridius, he says, we stay as one, right? And that was the only thing that they had to survive the attack. So this is what I try to do. I continuously use that phrase, one team as one, right? Those type of very concise type communications, just to remind them, to let them know that this isn't you, this isn't me, this is us, right? And we need to act as one to get it done.
Well, I appreciate that. And my premise was very more anecdotal and experiential than what you brought to the table for the chapter. And again, anybody that will watch this video later, Jerry not only contributed to the chapter, but I had so much information. I could have, he could have written the book, and I put him in the appendix because he has experience on walking cross-culturally, sometimes 10 time zones, and being able to be a power releaser. And he's really an expert in this shared leadership concept. Obviously, as he mentions, in Europe, it is very rampant. I think in America, we've had it, and I think we may still have it, of course. But I appreciate your contribution to that. And before we go,
Dr. Furbis.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one last thing. Key to shared leadership is for leaders to be able to surrender control, empower their teams, surrender control, and for teammates to be willing to submit to each other. Okay? Because sometimes you have the folks that they don't want to talk together, they don't want to work together, right? But if we're willing to submit to each other's leadership, right, and treat and look at everyone at the same level and work as one, then you'll have successful shared leadership.
I appreciate that. And I know my first few months in coaching you, we walked into, I think, a space that we both liked each other and we respected each other. So there's a lot of factors that bring about likability, which also brings about sustainability, productivity, and influence. Anybody else? I'd love to contribute before we wind it up here. We've gone over a little bit, but it's been really rich. Anybody?
Rick, I just add one thought, and that is, I haven't done a word search in the book to figure out what one word do you use the most, but it feels like there's one word that is across every chapter, and that is simplicity. You're trying to take the complexities of team and simplifying purpose, which, as you write, contributes to likability, but the shared purpose, not assigning purpose, the shared ownership of developing purpose, fueling that likability. It just, while it is simplifying, it's complex when you're leading it.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know who said this, somebody may remember who quoted it, but there's been a lot written about great leaders take complexities and simplify them. And I know Jerry's an Army veteran as well, and I know Matt, you've got a couple kids in the military. So great leaders have that kind of mind where they start filtering and getting it simplified. I think that is, and I didn't know that it might have come up that much, Chuck, in the writing, but I know that we have a hard time leading people with complexities and strategic plans that are just so dimensional that we really can't execute. So that is a part. Maybe that's the next book we all might want to write together. And that is, great leaders simplify and pinpoint. things. So I want to thank you all. And I know we'll have some other listeners. I'm sorry I didn't go on Facebook today, but we have the book and we have the workbook. We've got a course. Actually, Jerry has motivated me. I'm into many hours of writing a 3-day course off the book that will also be downloadable and digital. But the book's available right now on Amazon. It's also available on drrickforbus.com. So I appreciate all of your time today, and just thank you for being around. Thank you for being likable leaders, people I like to hang out with and also watch lead and all of that. So thanks a bunch, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
See you soon.